Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful Reedville neighborhood in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We have a wonderful show for you today, coming to us from beautiful Southern California. He is the author of the brand new picture book, No One Mocks a Panda. We'll be speaking with Paolo Mazzucato. Couple of quick notes before Paolo comes in. I just received a wonderful note from my friend Margaret Kelly, who is the librarian over at the East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library. The East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library is one of my favorite places to perform at. I've been performing there for years. And they have a brand new facility that was opened just a couple of years ago. East Boston is close to my heart. I lived there for 3 years. It was the place where I got my first apartment. And it was so cool. I felt so independent. But anyways, over the years, I've gone back. The neighborhood's really changed, but it's always maintained that beautiful character. It really is a wonderful part of the city of Boston. And I love, like I said, I love performing at the library. And Margaret Kelly, the chief librarian over at the library, just sent me this note and wanted me to share it with folks who are interested in booking Jedley's Magic Circus. She says Jedley's Magic Circus is always a guaranteed hit at our library. His magic tricks amaze his audience, while his zany antics have them howling with laughter. I love that. Yeah, I really do. It's a lot of fun bringing my magic show into a library or into a public school or a church or wherever you might be having a special event. And I would love for you to check out my website to find out more about my show and how you might be able to bring it to your community. The website is jedlie.com, Jedlie, jedlie.com. I also wanted to share some exciting news from my friend Jeffrey McSkimming over in Australia. You might remember Jeffrey was on the show letting us know about the latest edition of the Phyllis Wong Mysteries. And I met Jeffrey. Jeffrey is married to my friend Sue Ann Webster, the First Lady of Magic in Australia. And I picked up the first Phyllis Wong mystery, kind of like as a favor to my friend's husband, and I loved it. I fell in love with the book. The character Phyllis Wong is an amazing character, and the stories that Jeffrey tells are just masterful, and they're lots and lots of fun. I love the language, I love the spirit, I love Phyllis Wong, and I think that you would love. I absolutely think that you would love the Phyllis Wong Mystery Series. And this is exciting because the Phyllis Wong Mysteries are now available in paperback editions. That's right, just now out on paperback, all of the Phyllis Wong Mysteries. You can find out more at phylliswong.com, phylliswong.com. Joining us right now from Orange County in Southern California, our guest today, talk about a triple threat. He is a playwright, he is an author, and he is also a movie producer. Please welcome to the podcast the author of the brand new middle grade book, The Gondoliers, Paolo Mazzucato. Paolo, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Yes, it's good to be here with you too, and Paolo is happy that I pushed record this time and everything is working. Fortunately, we didn't go too far into it before I realized that nothing was recording. So welcome to the show. Tell us all about the Gondoliers.
Well, it's one of those stories that I just it sort of comes from my father is from the Veneto region in Italy, and so as a child we used to always go to visit Venice, and there's something about the city itself. And then when I returned years later with my own daughters, we were wandering through the streets of Venice, and the sun is starting to fade, and some of the areas of Venice are very touristy, let's say, and others are not as traveled. And so the San Polo district, which is across from San Marco, there's not lights, there's not people walking around. So we're walking through those narrow alleyways, and the sun is fading, and I'm like, we're going to get lost because it's a maze. Uh-huh. If you've ever been, it's a maze of passageways. And so, from that experience, the whole notion of something that happens between sunset and dusk and the magic that arises from the city, it just started forming an idea for a story. And certainly I wrote with my daughters in mind and with the young people, and that sort of magical idea of what could happen in this magical place.
One of the things that I discovered early on in my podcasting days is just how wonderful middle grade writing can be. I was introduced to Jeffrey McSkimming and his Phyllis Wong mysteries, and I read the first book kind of as a courtesy to a friend, and I was really blown away. The writing is really sophisticated. The stories are wonderful, and what is it about middle grade that just kind of brings everybody together?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful audience. You start off with the idea that you want to engage a young mind in that idea of adventure and in a sense of a story. And what happens is that you thematically and with the characters, you sort of try to speak to a wider audience. And I think that if the adult audience or a young adult audience even just sort of gravitates toward this thematically what you're trying to do and explore this magical world, it becomes something much larger than simply a story for children.
Now, what's the reaction what kind of reactions has your daughters had after being, when the idea for the gondoliers was born? How do they feel about, being part of that creation?
Well, I've always tried to include them in a lot of my stories. I mean, I wrote, early on I wrote a book called The Dream of the Rainbow Unicorn, which was a poem that I had originally written for my oldest daughter, who's now much older. But every year for their birthday, I'd write them a poem and put in a little book with a little picture so you see their progression. So they've always been part of that process for me, and trying to make them part of the adventure as well. And again, reading with your children, the name of your it's such an important thing because I read to my daughters when they were young. I mean, not just the children's fairy tales and stuff, but I read Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I think it engages children, if you engage them early on with literature and with storytelling, it enriches their life beyond just having fun with them for the evening before bedtime. Mm-hmm. They learn to identify with characters and to empathize. And I think those are all things that we need more of in the world. So, always try to involve your children if you have them and not only just the reading, but if you're writing stories as well. And, I think they become part of that adventure as well.
Yeah. As you were talking about reading literature to your kids and not just the picture books, I think one of the things, and I had this experience too when my kids were younger, and I think my son was 5 or 6, and the first Harry Potter came out, and he wanted to read it. And I'm thinking about it now because he's down in Disney World today with his new wife. And it was down in Disney, and I said, okay, and we picked up a book, and before I said okay, I didn't realize it was 700 or 800 pages long. And so we started reading this book, but I think what it did is it kind of gave my son this sense of empowerment in that I was acknowledging that he was growing, mm-hmm. and that he was, that he could still enjoy the picture books because we definitely read them to his younger sister together, and he would really like that. But it was like he wasn't able to access Harry Potter on his own. He certainly wasn't able to read it at 6 or 7 years old by himself. But my being willing to sit down and read it with him and let him read the words that he could read kind of was like a way of me saying, hey, you're a big guy, you're growing up, and acknowledging that they're getting more mature. And I think that's really huge for kids when we as parents and especially as dads do that for our kids.
Oh yeah. Acknowledgement is everything. I mean, it's making them feel part of the world. Mm-hmm. And depending on the story, I mean, again, when I read, The Hobbit to my older daughter, we get to the end and spoiler alert, Thorin Oakenshield, when he dies, we were both bawling. Yeah, mm-hmm. You really get involved in the story there. And the funny thing is that after a while, when she got a little older, she was like, well, I want to read a book to you now. So instead of going to her bedside and reading to her, I'd go to the bedside and I'd listen. She picked up like the Percy Jackson series. And so she read the entire series to me. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes it's a wonderful experience, really. Reading with your children is, I can't speak highly enough of what it's done for their future, but not just for them, for me. I mean, it makes you feel wonderful too, to have that experience and that sharing moment with your children as they grow up too fast, and sooner or later they're off on their own. But it's wonderful that you've had that in the past, and I think it gives them a basis for loving literature and reading in the future as well.
Yeah, not to mention loving their dad.
I hope so. Hope that sticks.
Well, I mentioned early on that you really are, you have a voice in a number of different mediums. I want to talk a little bit about your recently released picture book, No One Mocks a Panda. But before we do that, I mentioned that you're an author, you produce movies, you're involved in plays. These are all different ways to kind of express your voice. Do you have a favorite? And if you do, why?
I think it's all about storytelling, and it's all about trying to communicate either theme or a sense of place, and I think it all begins with. I mean, I started back in high school writing little stories, and then I wrote this big science fiction epic that I wanted to shoot, and I borrowed equipment from the public access cable and got some friends together and try so you start with that idea, you want to tell a story, it's that telling a story. So then I went on from there I went to film school and came out to California eventually, and I guess you sort of go where the opportunity lies. And I mean, so for a while writing for film was definitely the thing I was doing, and I fit the writing novels and writing literature. It's very different. Mm-hmm. I mean, screenplays are all about minimalism. It's like you tell something with as few words as possible. You just got to set the mood and then move on. Whereas with a novel, you're really creating a world, and you're really creating these characters that have to have flesh and bones right from the beginning. With a screenplay, it's sort of a blueprint for what they'll do eventually on film, and you'll have actors that'll flesh out their characters. But in the novel, it's I really enjoy it because you're really doing a lot more in terms of creating both not just theme and story, but you're really describing things in a way that hopefully evokes some sort of response that is very visual. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to create that thing for your reader, and it's challenging, but it's great.
Yeah. One of the things my daughter and I, who at 23, we don't get a chance to read aloud together very often, but we oftentimes read the same book and talk about it. Oh, and one of the things we're always talking about is just if we have an opportunity, if there's a book and there's a film, we'll try to experience them both, but we always try to do the book first, because at least I find that there's so much more meat in a book. As you were saying, the author really has to describe things, and there are very few times that I've been really terrified in a movie. There are a lot of things, jump out at you and you get that jump. Sure. But in terms of just kind of curdling your spine and really sending chills up and down your spine, books are the thing that do that all the time.
Wow. Yeah. It's fun. It's one of those things where, you're really immersing yourself in a world that, your imagination has to fill in the blanks. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're sitting and watching the film and it's filling in all the blanks for you. Mm-hmm. At least on an emotional level, but on a visual level, when you're reading a book, it's you have so much more to do. Right. It's so much more of an active form of enjoying.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I love about performing magic for audiences and the type of magic I do is that I can't do it by myself. I need somebody up on stage interacting with me. And that's what I find in the book. It's much more interactive, even though you may be sitting on the couch or sitting on a bed. And it doesn't look like you're doing anything, but your mind is so involved in just kind of creating the pictures that you're reading about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also find that reading out loud is very different from reading to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I find it when I was reading to my daughter, you get into it a little more. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit of a ham, but you sort of try to feel like the characters. And when I'm writing, I do the same thing. I noticed that sometimes I'll actually speak out the characters' dialogue in their voice. And, I'm a little weird in my office just writing, but, it sort of gets you in that framework as well. And it's an interesting experience from that point as well. You're really delving into those characters and their story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I too love reading aloud. I can't do it on public transportation. I mean, it's just not a good idea.
Just do it. They'll look at you funny, but who cares?
Well, let's talk about another great book that you just recently released that is great to read aloud. No One Mocks a Panda. Tell us all about that.
Well, No One Mocks a Panda is for younger readers. Obviously, it's a picture book with illustrations, and it's really just a exploration of it's the animal world, but it's kind of our world. I mean, the idea is no one mocks a panda for being both black and white, mm-hmm. and it goes on to have different examples of different animals, and of course, the conclusion is it takes all colors, shapes, and sizes, and that's what makes the world interesting. Because otherwise, it's a pretty boring place to be. So mm-hmm. the idea is certainly one that I think is important for children to hear, especially in today's world. Mm-hmm. One of inclusion and diversity, and trying to get them to embrace who they are. Embrace I can't remember the line exactly. It's just basically embrace the beast that you are, and don't worry about the world. You have to sort of live into yourself, be true to yourself. So yeah, I thought it was an important story. And again, one that certainly inspired by my children and by the people that, the interactions that we have in our daily life. And, it was certainly a story that I felt was, worth publishing. So mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wrote it, and lucky there's enough people who want to read it. That's great.
What kind of reaction have you received from folks who have read No One Mocks a Panda?
No One Mocks a Panda has had great, especially with people who recognize it not just as a little children's story, but as one, parents. There are a lot of parents, including my own, that have multicultural, I would say, as opposed to. I'm not too fond of the idea of multi or biracial, because in the end we have to sort of accept that we are one race, mm-hmm. and so if you want to say we have multicultural children, that's great because. Everything from, I have an Italian culture. My wife has she was born in Hawaii, but the Japanese culture is, her ancestry is from there. And I have friends who are Polish and Irish. And so I think it's a sense that we have to embrace all cultures and stop trying to separate us by saying, well, adhere to your traditions and love your traditions, but embrace them all because that's what makes us all a wonderful place to be. It's the world is great because of the multicultural world that we live in. So, the response has been wonderful. And it's not just in terms of, multicultural, things, but, kids that are bullied in class. Mm. The idea that, a panda is not going to be mocked just because he's black and white. Or the other animals in the, you don't mock a flamingo because it's pink or a giraffe because he has a long neck. It just doesn't make sense. So the idea there is simply just every animal is different, just like every person is different. And so embrace that and get on with your life and just, it's one of those things that makes us better if we just learn to embrace each other. Mm-hmm. So it's been great.
Yeah. I love that, having a multicultural family myself. And it's really fun, and it's, one of the things that's fun is that I think my kids are learning that, yes, there are certain things that you can find in one culture and certain other things that you can find in the other cultures. But there's so many people who will look at, Irish culture. Well, that means you like this, this, and this. And my kids are like, well, no. There's a lot of shades in there. Just because they wear green on St. Patrick's Day doesn't mean, and the same is true with their Latino side. It's like, yes, there's, you start with that basis, but there's so many other flavors within each one of those cultures.
Yeah. It's great. I just realized I misspoke. My wife wasn't born in Hawaii. She was raised in Hawaii.
Oh.
I'll hear about it later if I got that wrong. It's again, I think it's wonderful when we embrace the diversity of cultures that make up our country and sort of embrace them all and say there's something to learn from each culture. Mm-hmm. And there's something to learn from each person and their individuality and something that they bring to the conversation. Mm-hmm. So it's great. And that was certainly the goal for that book, is to sort of shine a light on it in a way that's accessible to young children, because they can read that on their own. Obviously, it's not the novel that the Gondoliers is. It's more of a look at the funny picture of the panda bear, and next page is a different animal, and so it's fun.
Well, there's a whole lot going on in your life. Where can folks connect with you online to find out about your books and your movies and everything else that you're doing?
There's lots. That's funny. I mean, you try to juggle as many things as possible. I always felt like the circus performer, spinning the plates.
The plates, yep.
I got one plate here, and you gotta keep them all moving, because otherwise it's a disaster. But I've just I have online. There's a website for my writing. There's a website for obviously IMDb is the movie database site that has the films I've worked on, but Beppy Books, which is they have a website where they have all my books as well. It's beppybooks.com. I just started Twitter. My daughters are like getting on my case and saying, "Oh, you're so old." So I decided to tackle this Twitter thing, and I think I have like 2 tweets. Uh-huh. But so it's social media is a great tool for sort of getting out there and seeing what else other people are doing, and also putting your stuff out there. So I'm slowly learning. I'm an old dog learning some new tricks, but
Now have your daughters suggested that you get on Instagram? Probably not, because they don't want you creeping their account, right?
Well, Instagram, it baffles me, because it's all about pictures, right? I don't get it.
Well, that should be easy for a movie producer. Come on.
I'd rather write words. I don't know.
Well, I'm really excited. We've, and also you have a website that I'm on right now, mazzucato.org.
Is that which one is that?
I have, writer.mazzucato.org.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably part of me.
He does have a lot of plates spinning in the air.
Yeah. I lose track of them sometimes.
Well, this is great. Well, I'm really excited. We've had a great time talking today. Make sure you check out Paolo's books, 2 new children's books, No One Mocks a Panda, and also The Gondoliers, and the full title is Gondoliers, The Secret Journals of Fanticulus Glim. Did I say that right?
That's perfect.
That's awesome. We've had a blast today speaking to our guest, Paolo Mazzucato. Paolo, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed tremendously being here with you.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Shayna Simmons. Shayna is a multi-talented author and all-around amazing person. She's the author of The Cat and the Lion, a brand new picture book series that she'll be introducing to the world. She'll be on the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Before we go, I just want to remind all the authors that are listening, if you're looking for a way to help your book stand out amongst the crowd of children's books that are published every year, every month, you might want to check out the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. What we have done is we've created a panel of evaluators. They're parents, they're teachers, they're kids, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And along with that status comes also some great ways to help market your book, to help let people who might see it on a shelf know that your book is worthy of their attention and is a book that they should check out. You should check out our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. And of course, you can find out about it at readingwithyourkids.com. Hey, I want to thank Paolo Mazzucato for being here today. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, for all she does for the show. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support that she gives me. And of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you find your podcast. Spotify is a really great one. We've started to get a lot of listeners over at Spotify. And of course, thank you most of all for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.